Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I am your host today, Jen, and I am joined by the author of a slim little volume that really changed my perspective on both journaling and art and ways to sort of get in touch with yourself. And I found it so enlightening, and I am so excited to bring it to all of you. Hello, welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yes. Well, first of all, Jen, thank you for having me. I am Susan Hensley, and my book is titled Art for Your Sanity. And the subtitle is How Art Journaling Can Help You Manage Chaos and Unleash Joy. So I am thrilled to be here. And I love your description because it is a slim book, because I firmly believed, and my goal in writing it was to enable people who read it and were curious to be able to read it in a setting, because it's got pictures too. So it's about 100 pages with pictures, personal anecdotes, brain research. It's to be able to read it and then try it. Mm-hmm. So although not an instruction manual at all, that was really the goal of the book.
Nice. Yeah, I think it does a great job of that. And being so efficient text-wise, I think is a really big part of that, because you're really empowering the reader to do what you have done. And you are giving them enough guidance to be inspiring and empowering, but not so much that they can't, the whole point is finding your own voice in your own art and letting that appear to you. And so it really does, I think, suit the purpose very well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting balance in writing the book, which the ultimate premise is you should only be doing this if it sparks some joy, and you want to start there with this sense of play or curiosity. That's the starting point. And if it doesn't do that, I would be the first person to say, and I do say in workshops, then you should stop, right? This isn't another should. But in writing the book, you do recognize there needs to be more guidance and some of the brain science that's out there about the whys, because adults as learners come at it from so many different perspectives that trying to find that balance between a person who just wants to jump in and do it right away versus a person who wants to know all the steps and the whys, and yet not have it become prescriptive, was really an interesting toggle that my writing coach and I played with in that.
Nice. Yeah, I really love, the sense of play that not only characterizes, I think, the message of the book, but your approach to writing the book, which is very authentic, and I love that. Could you talk a little bit about how art journaling as a sense of play evolved for you? I know that this was a practice that was sort of began in the early pandemic days for you, which was an event that I think revealed to many of us sort of the limits of our, everyday coping strategies. So yeah, can you talk about how you cultivated play in your own life and how that led to this project?
Sure. So I think it's very easy as an adult for your life to fill up and not to think about play. And I am a passionate reader and passionate traveler. But if people would say, what do you do for fun? I'd be like, well, I like to read and travel. And that used to not feel like a robust enough answer. It was interesting. I felt like, gosh, everyone else has more of a hobby. And I wasn't so much searching for a hobby, but occasionally I would try doing some different things. Rather, golf, definitely not. Love spending time in nature, walking. And a friend of mine who had a pretty bad ankle break got very into art. She's one of those people who could take an online art class and actually realize some hidden talent. And next thing you know, she's actually getting commissions and selling art. And so she was going to teach a few of us some basics. And I went on a sort of rainy Saturday. It was like 2 hours. And while she was trying to teach the others like portions and proportions and shapes, I ended up with some like oil paints and made like a brown mess. And, I was like combining, I don't know, blue and red, got some purple, and then I put some black in it, just one of those messes. And I loved it. And given the amount of coaching I've done, both as sort of an HR executive and then in people's personal settings, I'm very attuned to when something sparks joy. No matter what it is, we need to pay attention. We are so aware when something's unpleasant, something, hurts us, like you touch the hot stove as a kid and that's how you learn. We're not as good, and culturally we're not taught to follow what we love in that same way, particularly if what felt good was making a brown mess of paint and not actually learning the 3 proportions of a face or some such thing, right? Whatever she was trying to teach us that day. So I started to just think about, wow, that wasn't what I went there for, but this was really fun. And should I play more? And I got some very, very inexpensive materials because I'd made a brown mess. And I think there's a real key in starting with the things you used as a child. And actually, I think always, all these years later, I still use the things you buy at Five and Dime or wherever you get them. It's the crayons, it's the glue sticks, it is nothing fancy. And I tell a story in the book, I believe, that a friend of mine who knew I was really enjoying this bought me some really beautiful art supplies because she knew I was enjoying this. And the first time I went to use them, that inner critic, that sense of play disappeared. And that inner critic of, I don't know what I'm doing or how to use these, came up. And this was long before I thought I would write the book. And I recognized at that moment, in eventually when I wrote the book, but that moment, that part of what kept me coming back is that it stayed fun. And it was a sense of play, and that silencing that inner critic became such a big component of the book. And I think anything in life, I'm going to expand here, when we are telling ourselves mean and unkind stories about what we are trying to learn, that quelches all learning. So just a general thought that is a theme that really came to light for me in my own art journaling practice.
Yeah, I really love how cultivating a sense of play is so linked to working with the inner critic, because that is, I think, what stops adults from making art, right? Like when kids make art, they are not evaluating what they're making while they're doing it. And so it's a lot more fun for them. um, could you talk a little bit about like how you get in touch with like the strategies for silencing the inner critic when you hear that negative little voice kind of seeping in the back? Like what are your what kind of tools are in your toolkit for that?
Sure, there's several. I will start with just the intention, which is to play. In my workshops and even on the online course, I like to just say, take 3 minutes, put on, say, a favorite song. You don't need to. And for the duration of that, fill a page. Take 2 crayons and just fill a page with color. And that gets you out of your head really fast. And to do an exercise that just sort of frees up that very linear left brain with all the judgments, which can be really helpful most of the time, but aren't helpful when we are trying to create. So I start there and just taking a breath afterwards and realizing that felt good. Then I try and teach, fall in love with your process and what you're creating. Become your own, if you will, proud parent, proud coach, proud teacher, whoever that person was in your life who gave you really consistent encouragement. Look at what you're creating for the sake of creating, because it's not about the output. It's like, look what I created with my 2 colors and 3 minutes, right? Most songs are 3 minutes, I found out. So all it takes is a few minutes of it. So that helps. The other thing I've done with workshops is I'll actually say to people, you're going on a play date with yourself. And young kids have no trouble telling other kids they are not invited. And you almost tell your inner critic when you feel that person creeping in, you're not invited right now. Like, just hang out out there. This is just what we're doing. I'll pick you back up for something important, right? You can tell me how to be good at my job or whatever else. It's not like you don't have a place in my life, but not now. So we actually play with some of those exercises of talking and even naming that critic.
Yeah, becoming process focused seems so revolutionary, especially I think for our culture, which is so productivity based, and about what you are outputting rather than like really, just being in the moment and existing with your process, which is so interesting to explore. Um, you talk a lot too about how you use these techniques to, work with the subconscious to access hidden thoughts and beliefs. Why do you think that working with images and sort of artistic expressions can be more effective than words, like traditional journaling in some cases?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because I had to really spend some time thinking about because I was a lifelong journaler and first career as a journalist. So I've been very attached to words. And darn if I find a visual medium that gets me there. And here's why. Many times we don't have the words. That's a phrase we will say when we see a tragedy or when we're trying to show compassion or empathy. Think of how common when you have a loved one going through something really terrible, you say, I don't have the words. It's because it's true. There are so many layers of emotion that even the most attuned, best wordsmith in the moment of the emotion, there's like, gradations of 20 different words. Whereas with color and with symbol and shape, it wraps all of that. We are used to in our culture, just to give you an example, blue can symbolize tranquility as well as sadness, right? We will culturally associate blue with our sky and optimism even. So we understand that in the choice of blue, it can encompass so much. Same with red. Red is a cultural symbol for love and anger. So I think using color and knowing what feelings, it helps to sort that, not linearly, not sort of consciously, judgmentally, but emotionally. It also allows you to feel your way through versus thinking your way through. And that's where that tapping in subconsciously made such a big difference.
That is so interesting, and it squares with some things I have, heard in therapy about how sometimes words can actually get between you and the feeling that you are trying to describe. And in addition to color, there's like, the way you slash a crayon across the page or the way that you spray the paint, like it involves your whole body at some point too, which I think is really cool.
So, absolutely. When I started to really understand what a safe container for challenging emotions, my art journal could be, and I would come to it, what I felt was a rage. And yes, I would be busy with my crayon or my watercolor, slashing red and purple, whatever the colors were. And then as your whole body sort of doing it and releasing, all of a sudden, and it happened surprisingly quickly, I start to recognize what felt like abject rage started to go into actually some fear, some maybe shame that maybe I had caused this. And it was really interesting how quickly, and I'm a fan of therapy and participated, how much faster than me trying to talk and explain to another. And that's what I appreciated about being a container for your own inner wisdom and your own self-discovery.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful thought. I spent a lot of time reading the book and, like making a little bit of art on my own on the side, thinking about, being focused on the process of art, trying to silence the inner critic. A lot of it is sort of like almost close to mindfulness techniques, you know, because it's about like being in the moment, you know, not letting yourself worry about like what it's going to become or like all the chores that you put aside before you did this. Like getting to really be present in the moment is also something that like our culture does not always like make easy or reward. So
No, you're absolutely right. And meditation is a tool and practice that I have. And what I loved about art and art journaling is because it has an action. If you are a person who's action oriented, it can move you into the moment versus what can feel like the fight of just focusing on my breath, and then you're just tracking the thoughts that are passing through. They go together, absolutely. And for many people that need to have some motion or something else to focus on in order to drop into the moment is super helpful. I mean, similar to how people will say, go out, look at the sky, take a walk in nature. There's some action that is soothing and helping you to drop into the present.
Yeah. It's just full of so much interesting information and so many really, really fun ideas for, you know, incorporating this practice into your everyday life. Um, do you think you'll ever work on a book like this again? I know you're probably also really busy with, you know, all the other hats that you have worn and wear. But like, do you see more writing about art in your future?
You know, I'm a bit torn whether it's about art journaling, because so many times in the workshops and even in the online training, it was funny because it's just me talking to create online training. I became aware of the stories we're telling ourselves. And I'm playing with, is there a book, although things have been written in that space, about other tools to help us gain awareness of the unhelpful stories that we are believing. You know, that can get pretty deep into meditation. But what I loved about art journaling, simple tool, easy place to start, little as 5 or 10 minutes a day. And then if it works, it goes on. I'm processing, is there something like that that can help us, if you will, with what I would call the non-productive loops that we get into?
Mhm. I love that idea. Wow, that's really interesting. Well, I'm going to, you know, wait for that book. And, you know, if someday if you want to come back to the show to talk about that one too, you know, that would be great. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Oh, thank you. I loved our conversation.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Okay, listeners, it's your turn now. Please check out Art for Your Sanity, how art journaling can help you manage chaos and unleash joy. I love unleash joy. That is so good. It's a great combination of verb and noun. Just great job. All right, listeners, it is now time to close this chapter. See you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.